Thank you so much for those who are staying with us. We are very pleased today to have Margot van der Velden, who is the Regional Director for WFP in West and Central Africa, and she will talk to you about the situation in Nigeria. Please, thank you so much for your patience. Margot, you have the floor. Please go ahead with your introduction, and then we will take some questions.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to begin by telling you about Aya. Aya is a 45-year-old mother whom the World Food Programme team in Nigeria met last week. When the conflict reached her hometown in Dikwa, first to Chad, then back to Nigeria. For over a decade, Aya was on the move together with her children, and they've never really had a stable home, only uncertainty and only survival. And as the team sat with her, she shared something that stayed with me, and I wanted to share this. Before she was receiving food assistance, she had no way to feed her children. And in some evenings, what she would do is boil a pot of water, and then not to cook, but to give her children hope. And she kept it simmering until the children fell asleep, believing that food was on the way. And that was how she managed to get through many of the nights. And when she finally arrived in the internally displaced persons camp in northeast Nigeria, she finally felt safe and relieved and was able to cook every day. And it is very difficult to imagine, but this is the situation of millions of people in Nigeria today, where we witness an unprecedented hunger crisis driven by escalating violence, mass displacement, and collapsing livelihoods. In Nigeria today, just to give you an impression, 31 million people are facing acute food insecurity and are in need of life-saving assistance. And to give you, put this a bit in perspective, this is equivalent to the entire population of Texas going hungry. However, due to the severe funding cuts that the World Food Programme is facing, we have exhausted our food and nutrition resources. And in the beginning of August, we will have to face the heartbreaking reality of having to suspend our operations for the populations in northeast Nigeria. And so our teams will have to tell the populations that they no longer will receive aid, not because there is no need, but there is no resources for that assistance. So over 1.3 million people will lose life-saving food assistance and nutrition support. 300,000 children will be at risk of severe malnutrition, and more than 700,000 displaced populations will be left with no means of survival. Over the next 6 months, we urgently need $130 million to maintain the operations in Nigeria, prevent situations like Aya's, and restore hope. Now, the sad part is also that this crisis is not just in Nigeria. Across West and Central Africa, WFP is facing critical funding shortfalls that are forcing us to reduce and suspend many operations in some of the most fragile contexts in the continent. WFP's aid in the region has dropped by 60% compared to last year. And now we are reaching only 5 million people, with Mali and Niger suffering cuts of over 80% in emergency support. In countries such as Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Cameroon, and Central African Republic, we are facing and we're seeing the same pattern: rising needs, shrinking resources, and growing risk of instability. In Mali, for example, we see that many of the severely vulnerable communities, displaced or refugees, are projected to go without food assistance during the lean season, the most critical time of the year. In Niger, for example, unless urgent funding is secured, emergency operations are risk coming to a halt in the next few weeks, just as humanitarian needs remain acute. Also in Central African Republic, thousands of refugees and returnees are at risk of losing support altogether. But even in Chad, where we continue to see a daily arrival of more than 1,000 refugees from Sudan, limited resources are stretched. And so this situation represents really more than a reduction in aid. It's a significant decrease in life-saving support for millions of people. And as you know, when food assistance disappeared in these types of situations, hunger deepens, tensions rise between the communities and they fracture, and instability increases, and making it very, very difficult for this region to have peace and resilience. Now, WFP is obviously fully committed to the region and to the people we serve, but without urgent and sustained donor support, we are really being forced to scale back and prioritizing really only the most life-threatening situations and leaving millions who are in dire need behind. We're ready to scale up. We're very present in the region, but we cannot do it alone. Many ayahs, like the mother in Borno, need us to act now before hunger turns into further instability and more forced population movements. As I'm concluding, I want to remember the millions of people in Aya's family situation in the West and Central Africa region, and I'm very happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Let me go first to Edie Lederer from AP.
Thank you very much for doing this briefing on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. A couple of questions on figures. You said Nigeria needs, you need $130 million for 6 months for Nigeria. What was the original appeal and how much money did you get? And do you have similar figures for the other countries that you just mentioned, including the Central African Republic, Mali, and whatever? And why do you believe that aid in the region has dropped so dramatically? I think you said 60%. Thank you.
If I could answer, maybe if you want to. Yeah. So maybe just, yes, we do have the figures and we could provide all of the figures for all of the countries and indeed for Nigeria, 130 million for the next 6 months. For the countries of Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Cameroon and Chad and the Central African Republic, 415 million. For Nigeria, this is a cut also of 50% of the needs that we had foreseen. So overall, there is this 60% cut, and Nigeria is covering that 50% cut for the needs that were planned. But we can provide you with a table for all of the different countries and specific plans versus what was received thus far and what the gaps are remaining. As far as why is the funding so much reduced this year? I think this is really the region where the funding cuts have been most impacted, and I would think there's 3 reasons really that are there. One, obviously, there's massive prices across the globe, and we've just heard from Stephen quite a few that get more attention. I think secondly, many of our traditional donors have also had to look towards these crises, but also crises or situations at their home. In their home situation, so more attention maybe to internal problems than external problems. And thirdly, I think this is truly the region that has, over the last 30 years, had this lack of attention, has had this lack of investment, has had this lack of political priorities and media attention that has now resulted, I think, in this situation going on quite a lot in the shadow of everything else that's happening in the world. So therefore my cry for help and my alarm bell, because I think we've reached the situation that is spilling out of control.
Could I ask one follow-up question on the link between the lack of aid and instability in these countries? How dramatic is that in the countries that you've been talking about?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's very difficult to link exactly the 8 cuts, obviously, and then attribute instability and insecurity to those 8 cuts. No, and particularly because we've had last year quite some support, and it's the last few months that we're seeing this reduction in support. So I think it's very difficult to make that link or solely put that towards the 8 cuts. But we do see very much of an increase in insecurity and an increase in population movements. I'm currently in Niger, and we just hear about the different insecurity problems faced here. We know that in the northeast of Nigeria, the last few weeks, months, there have been an increased number of attacks happening. So we know that this is an extremely vulnerable period for the region. And if aid is not provided, this will only aggravate the situation further. And there were some studies done by UNHCR around the populations that were moving towards Mauritania out of Mali, where it's indicated that 20 to 55% of this population had started to move because of the fact that there was no food and food assistance provided in the communities where they were coming from. In addition to, I mean, a large percentage, of course, moving because of the conflict. But I think that it's difficult, as I said, to link the two directly, but it's obviously aggravating the situation of instability, and it's leaving space behind that can be filled up by further conflict and violence in this region.
Thank you. Let me go. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Prudence Arobani from News Agency of Nigeria. So I want to ask if you have the number of the IDPs currently in Nigeria and the number of refugees from Nigeria in other neighboring countries. And secondly, I want to ask what factors will you say are responsible for this uptick in humanitarian crisis in Nigeria and the sub-region?
I don't know if I respond. Okay, so we are facing in the region. We have about 10 million people displaced, forcibly displaced, and a large percentage is in the northeast of Nigeria. We have about 2 million people that are displaced or that are in areas where they can hardly move away from, and so that is the bulk of the displaced populations are obviously in Nigeria, in the northeast Nigeria, as well as in Chad, where we receive about 1.7 million refugees from Sudan. But then there's also a number of internally displaced in Burkina, for example, and refugees in Mauritania. I got to the second question that you were asking. Oh, what was the reasons? I think so. The reason in Nigeria is, I think there's a number of those. One that is we see an uptake of the attacks of the armed groups in the northeast of Nigeria. That we have had a period of a little bit more calm, but we have seen from the beginning of the year we've seen an uptick of insecurity and violent attacks in the region. We've also, of course, been faced in Nigeria with this unfortunate high-level inflation of food prices, and hence there is a larger proportion of populations that have difficulties meeting their basic needs based on the high costs of a minimum food basket, and that is also aggravating. And then obviously we had also last year, as you know, the massive flooding in the northeast, which has also led to not only loss of harvest at that time, but also still is impacting the ability of people to plant and to cultivate this year. So it's a mixture of factors that I think come now together and have reached this point of where we have this increased needs exposed, and at the same time we're seeing a massively reduced funding forecast coming our way.
The Nigerian government, in collaboration with the UN agencies and other partners, have the de-radicalization program, in especially the northeast Nigeria. But despite this program, which is meant to reintegrate repented Boko Haram members, but we still see upsurge in attacks. What is your assessment of this program? Do you think it's working? And if it is working, why do we still have an upsurge in attacks?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved in that program per se, so I would have difficulties evaluating that program. I think what we can say, however, is that I think the government of Nigeria, as well as the the governor in Borno State. They have a very clear vision of a response and a plan that is on one hand addressing the urgent need as well as finding solutions of more longer term solutions, including the reintegration of some of the fighters. I also would like to say that the government of Nigeria is the largest financer of this emergency response now in the northeast of Nigeria. But I think the scale and the complexities are such that we are, all of us together with the counterparts, are trying to explore new avenues of funding, but also maybe of programs and solutions that can bring hope, I would say, and stability to a very, very complex environment at the moment.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Noreen Hussein with IPS News. I want to ask about the children that WFP has been able to reach. Can you tell us exactly how many children are WFP supporting through its programs? And if WFP does not get the critical funding that it needs by the end of August, how many children will be at risk of acute malnutrition and wasting? Thank you.
Yeah, so at the moment we are indicating that without funding we have 300,000 children at an immediate risk of not getting the treatment that they are needing for moderate acute malnutrition. So that's the situation where we are, and that is the entirety of the program in the northeast of Nigeria.
Very good. Do we have more questions?
Entirely of the malnutrition problem, but that is the sort of the needs that we are fulfilling, let's say, in the response plan, and those 300,000 children are now at risk of not receiving their malnutrition treatment unless resources are obtained between now and the end of the month, I would say.
Very good. If we don't have additional question, Margot, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your patience, for waiting for the end of the briefing. So we had with us Margot van der Velden, who is the WFP, World Food Program's Regional Director for West and Central Africa. And she spoke to us from Niger, from Niamey, right? If I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.